Welcome to the Robcast. This is a show about Oakville, the people that live, work, and do business here. I'm excited about our guest today. This is Mario Zelaya, also known as Mario Z on TikTok. You are not going to want to miss this.
It's the Robcast Podcast. He's with you for the next hour or 20 minutes. Who knows? Let's see how it goes.
The Robcast is brought to you by Oakville's own Fisher Private Wealth Management of RBC Dominion Securities and Angus Fraser Private Banker with RBC Private Banking Oakville. And Agency One, Oakville's marketing powerhouse. Take your business to the next level with ease.
Here he is. It's Rob Raham.
Mario, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's pull it back here. Tell me about your growing up. You grew up in Oakville?
I did. We were actually sponsored by a church in Oakville. They were able to get my parents a job at a factory.
Okay.
And so we lived in Oakville for quite a long time, from the age of 5 until about the age of 19 or 20. So almost 15 years I lived here. I grew up here.
What was life like growing up for you? Obviously, you came from a different country.
Yeah, English is my second language. Love Oakville. Oakville will always mentally in the back of my mind always be my home.
Yeah.
All my friends growing up were from here. A lot of great people in Oakville. Love this place. I grew up in Queens, right in front of the mall in Oakville Place there. So the apartment buildings that were there, they were generally lower income apartment building. Had a lot of fun.
I bet.
A lot of good friends, a lot of good people that
Great
were there.
tobogganing hills just off the side there, right?
Every year.
Yeah,
every
exactly.
Year. Yeah, every year. That's right.
And so growing up, what are some of the fond memories you had here? And I'm trying to kind of get to where we're going with this, but what was special about it growing up here for you?
Honestly, I never, growing up, I never realized that we were poor. But I knew we were poor because we're in Oakville and people would talk about like, hey, I'm going to a cottage. I had no idea what a cottage was for the longest time. People would be like, I'm going to Aruba, and I'd have to look in an encyclopedia of like, what the heck is Aruba? And
encyclopedias,
it's like,
people still have those.
Oh yeah, this is pre-Google, this is pre-internet, and it's like, so I'm looking at encyclopedias to see what these people are talking about.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, it's just this is just where I grew up. This is where my childhood was.
Yeah. And so tell me about kind of what led to the businesses that you're running right now.
Oh man! So I did my undergrad in economics and finance. Did my master's in economics and finance. I was going to do my PhD, and I just decided I need to start making money. And I worked for 1 year in international banking for Scotiabank. Absolutely hated it. Realized I hate finance. I hate everything about the corporate world, and I decided to open up my own business. The first business I opened up was an agency. We did a lot of marketing and tech work. All my clients were Fortune 500 companies. I did all their strategy consulting, ideation, branding, a lot of tech. We had a lot of tech. All the major agencies in Canada at one point were outsourcing to us. We were one of two what was called at the time preferred marketing developers for Facebook.
Okay.
So we were basically a preferred consultant for Facebook, and we're one of the few that had that designation that could build Facebook apps when you could build Facebook apps back then. Early on too, it's like, this new phone came out. It's called the iPhone. Didn't come out in Canada. People may not remember that, but you can only get it in the States. I drove to Buffalo, bought the iPhone. We were one of the first app developers in the country. We created a Tim Hortons Finder app, RBC TD, and that was just great marketing just because it got a lot of attention. Our business really just exploded. It got acquired by a private equity firm. When it got acquired by the private equity firm, I was dancing with semi-retirement. I started I started one business, which was an experiment. It's called Bad Axe Throwing. So if anyone knows what axe throwing is today, like modern day axe throwing, it could be argued that it's because of me.
Wow.
So most people don't realize that it started in Burlington. Sorry, the first place started in Toronto. We were company number 2 in the world, and it started in Burlington. I'm the one that also owns another company called the World Axe Throwing League. So if ever you see it on TSN, ESPN, that's my company as well.
Wow.
So we write the rules, the regulations. We conduct the World Championship every single year that's aired on TV. I also have another business that then is manufacturing the actual axes and the equipment that people need. And this is purely an e-commerce / manufacturing business. I own patents, designs, illustrations. Basically, I've created a perfect product for that industry. And so from there is just like a web of a bunch of other businesses that came from there. Right now I'm getting more into development. I'm looking at developing condos, doing a lot of large scale.
Because you're building a custom home right now as well, right?
I am building a custom home.
Yeah.
So that I have
comes with challenges.
It is. It's a lot of fun, and I hired a full-time builder. He worked on Drake's house. He built Prince's house. He's built some mega mansions that, I mean, the house that I have, he's like, this is like a lake house of what I'm used to building in Muskoka. Yeah. And so the work that he's done is absolutely phenomenal. So I've had a lot of interest of people wanting me to build their custom homes. Because we have our own projects and that's not really a core business, we may take on a select one or two. Yeah. One of the other businesses that I'm working on too, because a part of the process of building a home is most people don't think of the cabinetry. So that's the walk-in closets, that's the vanities, that's the sinks, that's the closet, all this stuff. And so one of my other businesses is actually providing that. And so we are doing the full design and manufacturing, and we are doing it in a way where, because we're importing it as well, on average, I mean, in my home, I think I'm saving over $300,000. Yeah. From the cheapest quote that I received, and it doesn't include 99% of the stuff that I'm encountering.
And you're building it all here?
No.
So you just CAD, you design it, send it out, and it gets shipped over?
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You made an interesting point. Like, what was it when you got into the kind of world, kind of e-commerce in West Scotia? Like, what jumped out at you saying, this is not the right space for me?
You mean when I left Scotiabank?
Yes.
So it was the bureaucracy. How slow things went. Their whole like I was doing at one point, I would say director level type roles. Like I'm maybe 26 at the time, and their whole thing is like, well, if you want to be a director, just stick around for 5 years. Like 5 years, I should be in charge of this whole department. Right. Like I should be like a VP or an SVP, and I just knew I was.
So just like getting stuck in the hierarchy of positions.
100%, and it's difficult being like. Reporting to people who are less qualified and less intelligent than you. And
I think a lot of people can say that. People feel that way at least, right?
And it's hard. It's very hard. And I knew my income is set. Doesn't matter what the effort is that I put in. They would give me a project and they say you have 2 weeks to do it. I do it in 4 hours. Yeah. What can I do?
Look busy.
Okay, and it's like, review this document. Cool. I review this document. I find all the mistakes. It's done in like a day or two. Yeah. What can I do? Right. And it's just I'm the type of person that just likes to go, and so it just wasn't for me.
So I guess, Mario, the burning question that everyone's been kind of watching here in Oakville is when did the TikTok account start, and why you've kind of taken this approach to kind of maybe calling people out or questioning things? Like, where did that idea come up for you?
Well, honestly, I originally started it 2 years ago, and what had happened to me is I had a Tesla at the time. I had bought it in 2013, and back then I was going to treat myself to a gift, and I was going to fly out to Chicago. I was going to buy a Ferrari, and right when I was about to purchase the flight to go out, the guy's like, "Oh, I just sold it," and I said, "Dude, I'm kind of buy it," and he's like, "No, too bad, it's done." And my wife and we went to Yorkdale Mall, and at the time Tesla had just opened up that store, and I saw the Tesla, and I took it out for a test drive. It was the most unbelievable thing. This is in 2013. Yeah. And even the technology in 2013 doesn't compare to 99% of the manufacturers of what they make today. Right. It was just on a whole world, and I bought it on the spot. And when I say bought it on the spot, I put the deposit, waited for however long for it to be shipped from California, build it, and then it comes over. But it was an immediate thing after the test drive. And so I had that car for, I can't remember how long. But I had it for quite a while. I think it was 8-9 years. And what had happened is they had designed it poorly because it was the first model. And what would happen is when you have an air conditioner, the air conditioner has condensate, the water that gets created. That condensate, they had that hose dump on top of the battery. So the hose was literally just dumping constant water on the battery pack.
Like on purpose, or just like just a flaw?
It's just a poor design flaw.
Condensation and water and battery
yes.
don't mix, right?
Correct. And so one day I get this alert. It says high voltage, and that high voltage alert goes off. And I called Tesla and I said, "Hey, what does this mean?" They're like, "You need to bring that in now." And I was like, they've never said that to me before. And I know these guys really well because before they even opened up the shop in Oakville, they used to come to my house to service the car. There was no shop. There was no place to service it. And they had something called the Ranger service, which I bought. So anytime I would service the car, they would come to my home and they would service it.
Okay.
And so I knew these guys really well. They've known me for a very long time. And long story short, there was water that went in there. Basically, the battery's at risk at blowing up. High voltage is not good. Any electrician will tell you that. I didn't know what the heck it was until I looked it up. And so they said, yeah, we saw that this issue happened. We got a warning about a year ago when the car was under warranty. My whole thing is like, that's cool that you got it a year ago and that I've been at risk this whole time, and you know that this is a known issue, and you never said anything. They send me a bill for almost $28,000 to replace the battery. And I said,
no recall thing went out?
No recall. They never recalled the cars.
Even though they were aware of it?
They were aware of the issue. They quietly fixed it in 2014 or 2015 is what I understand. So the hose now extends in the front of the bumper. So it doesn't go on the battery at all. But when you look at the battery, I had the Transportation Agency of Canada, I can't remember what they're called. The Canadian Transportation Agency, I think they're called. Whatever their name is. They looked at it, even the guys like, this is messed up.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're not wrong, but he's like, I can't issue a recall just on one car. And I was like, dude, people don't know that they can call you. I'm like, this is the reality of the real world. Like, they don't know that they can actually go to you guys and escalate things to you guys. When their car's broken, they just think, hey, it's broken.
Right.
Too bad. And so I made a video experience of that whole experience, and it got like 18 million views, and it went viral. It got written about in almost every single major publication all over the world. And as much as I like Elon Musk today, back then, he was quiet about it. He never mentioned it at all.
Didn't want to show the flaw.
No.
Yeah.
He didn't want to acknowledge it, because I guarantee there could have been a class action at that time. There's no winning it. There's no win. It was a design flaw. It was never recalled. And then I'm on the hook for this, $29,000 bill for a battery. And I said, screw it. And so that's how my TikTok journey started. And then in general, I've just been doing random videos throughout the time. But that original account actually had gotten banned. There's certain things that they don't like you speaking about.
Yeah.
And even though it's your opinion, your voice, you will get strikes and you will get banned. And so I got, I think that account got banned about 2 months ago. So this new account that I have, I think in a matter of maybe it might have been 10 weeks, so maybe 2.5 months. I mean, I've grown it more locally, because a lot of the stuff I talk about today, the problem is the account that I used to talk about general stuff, and it would go throughout the world. It would go to Canada and the US.
Right.
The majority of the stuff I talk about today is localized to Canada, and I focus on Canadian issues and Canadian things that I think mainstream doesn't do a great job of covering.
Right.
And I do it with an explanation that is logical, thorough, and I have data that generally backs up my points. And so that's been the approach that I've been taking. And then it kind of transformed into this thing where people would send me messages, be like, hey, I want to remain anonymous, but did you know that people are coming to Canada to give birth to their children? So they get citizenship. They stick us with a $100,000 bill. Yep. They leave. Right. They go home, and then they come back 10 years later, and I'm looking at their credit profile, and it shows like, hey, you owe $100,000. Yeah, well, that's because I did this. They admit to it. They have no problem. So, there's all these underlying issues, for example, with immigration that exist today that no one is covering, no one is talking about. And so I have the voice and I have the ability to explain these issues logically.
Is it like part of like your being, like are you righteous, or you just don't like to see wrongdoings?
I think that the big thing is I put up with enough. I put up with enough shit in this country for long enough in these last 9 years under Trudeau's leadership to watch it crumble. Like, you look at the GDP per capita, where we are, we've fallen behind for the first time, and it all started from when he got elected. And so, all I've been seeing on my end is higher taxes, carbon tax, luxury tax, capital gains tax. Like, it's hitting every part of the economy. And they try gaslighting you to say, oh no, this is only for the wealthy. It's only designed for people like me, but it's not. And I think I've gotten sick of that. And no one's, everyone's afraid of getting canceled. I'm not. I don't care. You can't cancel me. Right. Like, go ahead and cancel me. What do I care? Like, what am I going to do? retire? Like, well, okay. I don't care. Cancel me for my opinion, and I don't mind doing that. And you have no idea how many messages I get from people thanking me for saying the things that they want to say that they're afraid to say because they'll lose their job.
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to people living in fear and people being unable to speak up to say what everyone else is thinking, where I have no fear.
So let's get into the kind of like the hot button topic right now in Oakville is this Joshua Creek. So explain to me kind of how this came to be, your original post, where the information came from, and because obviously like on all the social networks, there's conversations on Oakville Talk and all these different Facebook and Instagram networks. So how did it start? Like what came to be, or where did you find the information?
So I originally got a message from someone on TikTok. To date, she wants to remain anonymous, and I will do so. But she was basically saying, "Hey Mario, there's something odd going on in my street. Like my neighbor has cancer, the person across the street from cancer, a person 5 houses down."
And this is just recently, like a couple months?
This is like, I think they messaged me maybe three weeks ago.
Okay.
So it was recent. And so they said, this person a couple of houses down the street, they lived here for a while, they moved to Burlington, husband, wife, both dead. They died of cancer. And just the numbers, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what? And so I messaged her back and I said, hey, can we have a call? When we had that call, the numbers, the details, the neighbors, the names, she named everyone. And she knew it all in detail. And she knows everyone within the neighborhood. And
but
I was
she's
like,
keeping track dates and different.
oh yeah. Oh, her memory is impeccable. It's impeccable. Like it's just it was so detailed and so accurate. And I was like, she has cancer, and so she's like, I'm battling it right now. And she's like, there's something off. And so I made one video being like, and this is honestly just purely coincidental. I made a video talking about what radon gas is. And part of the reason I know what it is, even beforehand, is I have this ugly pipe sticking out of my house right now that I'm building. And I went to my plumber. I was like, this wasn't in the plan. I'm like, what the hell is this? He's like, oh, it's radon. It's this thing that's happening right now. There's studies coming out that there's just stuff that comes out of the ground. It's toxic. It's cancerous. And, he's like, it's apparently not good for you. So you just, you got to make sure you put an electrical outlet here. We plug a machine and it dispels everything out. Right. And so I said, holy crap. Okay, cool. Like, coincidentally, like I have a lot of water flowing there. So I put this massive vapor barrier on the ground. We have this big radon pipe that sticks out. And so I made a video talking about that. And I think that thing got like 1 million views in Canada. Right. And so it blew up. Literally, I think a day or two later, I then talked about what was happening in Joshua Creek. And everyone's like, hey, could it be radon? Could it be radon? I then get a message, I think it was 2 days later, from someone being like, you should really talk to my dad about this. He's got a lot more information. And I get messages like this all the time. And I was like, you know what? Why not? I email this guy. His name's John Shield. And he has been fighting the city on toxic dumps for 7 years. And the amount of information he has is unbelievable. And he went through the Freedom of Information Act. He tried getting a lot of information. He got a lot. He's been a thorn on the side of Oakville, of Halton, of Ontario, of the Premier's office, of Ontario, of the members of Parliament. He has been telling people and trying to yell it from like as loud as he can with what he has available. The gentleman's, I think, 80 years old. Is
he the creator of the current website, the Joshua Creek Inquirer? Is that a separate group?
That's separate. Okay. And the person who created it is me.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's me.
Yeah.
And it's all created with his information. So what happened was he provided me all this info, and this information's scattered in different emails. It dates back. The dates are from 2017, and he's been talking about it since then. And so the whole idea is the best way I can summarize it is this: Oakville is saying, he brought it up to a counselor. He said to Counselor Tom Adams, "Hey, I'd like to speak at City Hall or at the town council to talk about this. Like, this is an important issue." And the email, and it's literally all on the website, Tom Adams says, your request was denied by council. Then he kept pushing for it, and he's like, what do you mean it's denied? And he kept pushing and pushing, like, I'm not accepting it as like, what process? What was denied? What is wrong with what I'm presenting? Please tell me, because I can prove to you everything I'm saying is right. And then finally, the CMO, I think her name was Vicky, maybe. She's the town clerk. She responds back basically saying, hey, in order to speak, you need to be sponsored or there needs to be some sort of a thing passed by a council member. No one's passed it. Tom Adams never passed anything. He never supported, he never wanted him to be there, is my understanding. Otherwise, he would have passed that. So then the email says, if you want to talk on this topic, you can do that. You just have to go on our website 9 days before and see if there's a topic where it fits in. Right? So this happens, and then he's pushing, the mayor, and then the response is like, hey, oh no, and then the response from from Tom Adams, I believe, was, hey, our Carr is his last name. It's not Gary Carr. It's the other Carr. I think it's his brother or his cousin. That's the head solicitor for Oakville.
Okay.
Basically, he's like, he's going to deal with you. So what? Like, why would a solicitor need to deal with anything?
Right.
So that's how they left it. They passed the puck, and
the warning lights are going off here, right?
For sure. And then so the solicitor goes, "Hey, we don't know anything about your dumps." Okay. Halton Region puts out a letter. Yeah, they exist, and they were. We don't know who the owners are, but it was used by the Ford Motor Company in 1963 to dump sludge in there. Okay, so how does Halton know that they exist and that sludge was there and that it is a landfill, but Oakville has no idea?
I was reading one of the letters. It says, we talked to the owners in that one letter, right? It's like, we don't know who the owners are. In the same letter, it says, we talked to the owners, right?
That's the Ministry of Environment.
Okay.
So then now the Ministry of Environment says, hey, we know the owners. We talked to them, and they said there's nothing there, so we're good. So I'm looking at this, and pardon my language, but what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Oakville saying it doesn't exist. They don't know anything about it. Halton is saying it does exist, and there was sludge dumped in there. And the Ministry of Environment saying, actually, we do know the owners, and they said everything's cool. Okay, like nothing to see here.
Yeah.
And there's so much more than this. This is just touching the surface. And as I mentioned, and you brought up, the Joshua Creek Inquiry website. So for people who don't know, it's joshuacreekinquiry.com. The information is brutal. Yeah. It is brutal. It
almost seems like it's like, this can't be real, right? And it's more on the side of, why is no one talking about this?
Correct.
Like, that's what jumped out to me.
And here's the other thing too, is like, and I'm not making any sort of leap or any suggestions because nothing has been proven yet.
Right.
All we can say is that there's these allegations, and that's what they will say, and that's what I will say back. Sure, there's these allegations. But I'm also concerned at the fact that Ford, in the 1960s, they had done the same thing in the U.S. They have been sued by the state of New Jersey for dumping they use the words toxic sludge that is making people sick, that is giving them cancer, and there's a lawsuit, and EPA had also forced them to remedy that. There's a letter that exists, whether it's from Halton Region or the Ministry of Environment. I think it's Halton's letter. It literally says, yes, there is a Ford Drive dump that was used by Ford. It was due for disposition into the U.S. Why is there that hill still there? Why are they saying, Halton just put out a release. They're like, oh, we've seen this online circulations of,
it's more of defense mechanisms, right? They're not getting ahead of it.
No, 100%. But if you read the release, they said, we did a preliminary study on the region. Joshua Creek is fine because the mortality rates are low. But we're going to continue to work with authorities
in the incidents,
in the incidents and mortality rates. And I'm sorry, but why didn't you say that there's a lower incidence and mortality rate there? That to me, and I've dealt with lawyers all my life.
Wasn't the claim, like the title, no cancer found in Joshua Creek? Like
that was a news, I believe is it oakvillenews.org?
Oh, okay.
Whatever this website is, they literally says no cancer in Joshua Creek.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, not only did you take what the Halton region put out, which was also not forthcoming, but you also took that and actually lied to the public about it. Like, no one's being held accountable or responsible.
Yeah.
No one's doing anything.
Yeah.
And so all I'm doing is I'm just pointing to the facts. Why does it not say incidents? Like, why do they not release preliminary studies? Does that preliminary study include the people who left there, moved to places like Burlington, then got cancer, and then died? Because they didn't do it from the 1 or 2 years in Burlington.
Right.
Where did they live for the last 10, 15 years beforehand? Right? Like, what's that study looking at actually?
Yeah.
Is it just hospitalization rates? Like, are you looking at, people who have, moved?
It seems like the reality is they don't want to do that study.
No, they don't. And the craziest part is I actually spoke to, I'll keep him confidential, but I spoke to a biochemist. He used to work for Peel Region, and there used to be a department called, I think they called it Development and Abatement, I thought he said it was. I can't remember the exact name. It doesn't exist anymore, but this was back in the 80s. There used to be a landfill. The biggest one, he said, in the region was in North Sheridan Way, and that is, I think it's QEW, and I think it's Aaron Mills.
Aaron Mills, yeah.
Okay, so there's this 20-acre plot of land that's completely empty.
Yeah.
And he's like, you will never see development on there. He's like, what happened back in the 80s, he's like, people don't realize this. There's methane gas that was coming out of there. It was going into an industrial unit. A husband went to light up a cigarette for his wife. So he goes to light the cigarette, it blew up her face. She had countless surgeries. She had to wear a mask to hold her face together. The region got sued, everyone got sued, they settled it. He's like, this is all documented, it's public information, It happened. So we get called in and we had to fix this. And he's like, we tried burning the methane gas. He's like, you would see fires going out of there. We couldn't get rid of it. So he's like, we couldn't find a way to contain it. So there's one company and only one company in the world that had a special type of a crane. And this crane, what it would do is it would take a steel beam and it would vibrate really fast. He's like, we use 10,000 gallons a day to basically create this trench system. I would not go in there unless I had an oxygen mask tied to me. He's like, that's how toxic the stuff was. And he's like, mind you, back then, he's like, WHMIS had just started. Like, WHMIS was just like a thing. No one knew about toxicity. No one really knew about, carcinogens and all these chemicals and what it could possibly do to you. But I was smart enough to know that what's down there is not good, because my coworkers, when they would work on the soil or work down there, they would touch their face. They would come with boils in their face. Yeah. He's like, all this stuff was documented. He's like, we had one computer to 15 employees, so all the stuff was written by notes. He's like, I know they exist because I created those notes. And he was saying, he's like, this toxic dump was so bad. He's like, the stuff that we did was cutting edge technology at that time. And he was talking about basically a barrier system that got created around this massive dump that I guess stopped the leaching or stopped the chemicals from flowing down, because he's like, we would see a kilometers south from there, it would all drain into the lake. We found it all in creeks. He's like, you would see it sitting on top of water. He's like, this stuff is so bad. And there's a term that he used, and I can't remember what it was, but think of it all as a filtration system. And he basically said some substances, like when you dump in a toxic substance, there's things that are more water soluble and they will just go quicker.
Right, yeah.
And then it'll leave maybe behind some of the thicker elements of whatever that substance was. But what happens is the byproduct could actually be much worse than the original product. And he's like, that's the stuff that's scary. And he's like, I fought, his own words, I fought with the city not to have development happen in that area. That's how bad it was. He's like, I have firsthand testimony from drivers who worked at chemical companies. They would transport he said each truck would hold 10,000 liters. They would open up the valve in the back, tilt the truck. He's like, that was a quarry. He's like, you got to keep in mind, and what he's saying makes complete sense and it's reasonable. In the 60s, there were no standards, right? You have this quarry, and then he also said, he's like, no one could have imagined the growth of the Greater Toronto area and having all these houses and everything around that area. He's like, well, we do. And here we are today, and it's like we've forgotten the information that we had before, that we shouldn't be building around this area. And so, my question to anyone, like to you, would be, if you knew there was a toxic dump within a kilometer away from you, you're maybe downstream or you're on the valley end of it, would you move?
Right, exactly. So moving forward with this and this information that's starting to come out, like what are you kind of hoping to have, like, to accomplish with this? I mean, obviously it's awareness, and it seems to be growing quickly, both on the negative and some on the positive on your end, what you're trying to do. Like, what's your hope to kind of, or goal with this?
I think with all the people who have cancer, they deserve answers, for one. And let's assume for a second that is not even the case at all. Let's say it's completely unrelated. That's fine. It's not fine, but let's say it's completely unrelated. There needs to be transparency. And I think there needs to be an open conversation that needs to be had. And I think there does need to be a dedicated town hall. And I know for a fact there are a lot of people asking for it, and they're not getting answers. And so if your constituents are saying, hey, I read all this stuff online, I've seen the letters, I've seen the official correspondence from your office back to our citizens telling you that this is there, and you don't want, and you're trying to silence him, and you're not giving us, the time of day. I mean, in my opinion, I think anyone who has knowledge of this should start polishing their resume.
Yeah. I mean, we've gone through this in episodes previous. Another topic was, of course, the Midtown, right? And they kind of push things through. There's no community media anymore. There's no Oakville Beaver. So a lot of residents don't even know what's going on at Town Hall. Yeah. So it takes kind of the resident associations in those areas that kind of pipe up and start to fight back. Have you kind of gone that route, with the Joshua Creek resident associations?
Well, I think there's individuals that have brought it up to those associations, and I don't know exactly where they are in that process, but I do know for a fact that there have been repeated requests made to have a town hall meeting, because this is not, and from my understanding, a rule that whether city council, the mayor, or Oakville implemented. You want to talk on this topic, you got 10 minutes, and there's one delegate that can talk about. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's stupid. This is not like, how long have we been talking about this? There's no way you could possibly fit all this and have any sort of meaningful discussion in under 10 minutes. Yep. It needs to be a dedicated discussion, because I think there needs to be transparency, because there's obviously some sort of a disconnect where Oakville knows nothing, Halton knows something, and then Ministry knows something else. And so, why is the left arm not talking to the right arm, and it doesn't know what the head is doing? And that's exactly what's going on here. And so I think the biggest thing of all that needs to happen is, first and foremost, there needs to be discussions, and there needs to be testing on the soil. Prove me wrong.
Yeah.
I welcome. Prove me wrong. Prove everyone wrong. Labels.
Yeah,
all
like
this,
that. Course,
right. Let's label me as some sort of a tin hat conspiracy theorist. I would welcome that.
Yeah.
I would love to be wrong. Dig in that soil, where those fills are. They don't test it.
No.
They in their release, they said we test the water, and we test leachates. I think I'm pronouncing it right, but basically they're not even doing that properly, because from my understanding, that's just testing water anyhow. So they don't want to know what's there. Yeah. Otherwise, just let's get a third party. Let's have full transparency. I think the problem is elected officials that are elected by us think they need to govern us instead of work for us. And I think they've forgotten that. Yeah. They work for us. It's not the other way around.
Have you kind of taken a campaign and approach? Obviously, Joshua Creek seems to be the highlighted neighborhood, but obviously, if the statements are true down by the Ford area, that's bleeding down into southeast Oakville and all those areas down there, which you don't want to go there, obviously, and certainly our mayors and they don't want us to be talking about that area, of course.
Of course not. It's too rich.
So, but if you you would think if I got a letter living in River Oaks and this kind of topic came up, and I'd be wanting answers, mm-hmm. right? I'd be surprised if anyone would say, no, that can't be true. If I was raising children in an area where there's the potential, I'd want that kind of resolved quickly. But so is that kind of the next step to and I'm sure there's people in Joshua Creek who are engineers or can do these tests or have companies mm-hmm. that would kind of want to help out with this whole situation.
Yeah, correct. And I mean, I've had folks saying that, I do know hydrologists, I do know, an attorney, I do know so-and-so, but this stuff does require resources. And,
yep.
That there's been a lot of very helpful people that have come forward and given me information that I hadn't thought about yet, and given some guidance that I think makes a lot of sense. But I think ultimately right now it's in Oakville's hands, and they don't want to deal with it. And the way they're dealing with it is by having Halton Region come up with a press release saying, hey, there's lower mortality here, you guys are good.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like the first story I told with Tesla, right, where there was a problem, they didn't want to acknowledge it and just move on with it, right?
Yeah, and it's literally what the biochemist told me that worked for Peel. And he said, what you're discussing isn't anything different than what we did at Peel, than what other regions happen. This, if it's not handled properly, it's something that affects other parts of Canada, because we don't know where other toxic chemicals were dumped in. Like, it's got bigger repercussions, but at the end of the day, I mean, he said it better himself. No one wanted to deal with it 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. No one's going to want to deal with it now.
The coincidence of the same car company having the same situation, the same decade in the States, and being caught for it and having to clean it up and remedy it, isn't that just all too much of a coincidence?
Well, that's exactly what my point's always been. And it's did Canada have such a incredibly safer form of manufacturing vehicles in the 1960s than the rest of the U.S. did? Or could it possibly be more reasonable that they had the exact same manufacturing capabilities as what they did in the U.S. here in Canada as well?
Yeah.
And I think the latter is a much more reasonable scenario.
So let's go back to your website here. You had a forum up there at one point. Explain kind of what your goal is with the website ultimately.
So the goal is simply awareness. And I think Oakville residents need to know that this exists, this is happening, and it's not being acknowledged and it's not being addressed, at least not in any sort of reasonable fashion. At one point, people did submit information, and in, I think, a span of about a week and a half, I'll say, there was 110 people that had submitted information on the street that they lived on or their family member that lived on, the type of cancer that they had, who had cancer. Mind you, this is 110 people that filled out the form based on just my videos.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's no
on
media.
The news. It's not on City TV. It's
no one's covered it. Not CBC, not CTV, not Torstar.
Yeah.
Like, I've reached out to some of them. Some don't even want to touch it. Right? And that should also be very telling. And so for me to get that type of a feedback and that type of a response with just my efforts alone, maybe that's why they left out the word incidents. I don't know. Right?
Yep.
Like, that's just my opinion. It's all very suspicious.
What do you think if we kind of go down this road and you keep putting videos out and it's just like the gentleman before you who got, nope, you're not allowed to talk, you can only talk for 10 minutes. If we don't get anywhere with this, what are you going to do? Are you just back off and be like, I guess there's nothing we can do?
Well, I mean, if nothing gets done, I mean, there's nothing I can do, but there's everything the residents of Oakville can do.
Yeah.
And this is what I said before. There's going to be an election coming up, and when that happens, everyone that is involved, that has this information, they should polish up their resume or just enjoy retirement.
What do you think that's the tipping point? Not until the next election, where the issues might come up.
I mean, I think so, or that they'll probably get sued. Like, they will get sued, and I know there's been talks about doing a class action against the city and filing a lawsuit against them, because what they're doing is you can only just ignore a problem for so long. So there's a right way to address it, and there's the wrong way. Yeah. And right now they just don't want to deal with it at all. And so I think at some point in time, it might get to the point where their hand's going to be forced by the residents. It's not going to be coming from me. I don't live in Oakville. I don't live in that area. I'm not affected by it. I'm literally looking at helping people just by getting this awareness out. And so, there's only so much I'm able to do on my end, and ultimately it's going to fall in their hands.
So, what would you recommend to the people out there living in these neighborhoods, or just in Oakville in general? This is not just a Joshua Creek problem. This is an Oakville problem. So what would you kind of recommend to the people watching? What should they do about this?
Email the mayor. Okay. They have to email the mayor,
councilors,
their own councilors. We have to have a meeting. Like, it has to happen. And it's not something that should be ignored. They could bring in the Ministry of Environment. They could bring in Infrastructure of Ontario, who owns the lands. They could bring in the Halton region. They could bring in their consultants. But at the end of the day, there needs to be not only direct answers, but there needs to be clear next steps that also involve third parties and transparency. Without having, because that level of trust is gone. It was gone the moment Oakville said, we have no idea what you're talking about. Halton says, we don't know who the owners are, but there is a dump. And then the ministry says, well, we talked to the owners and we're good. And nothing's ever disclosed. So without transparency and without, it's hard to regain public trust when you've done something like this.
Yeah. Well, Mario, listen, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. You're welcome back anytime. And please stay tuned for another episode of the Robcast.
The Robcast is brought to you by Oakville's own Fisher Private Wealth Management of RBC Dominion Securities and Fraser Associates of RBC Private Banking. And Agency One, Oakville's marketing powerhouse. Take your business to the next level with ease.